Iranian journalist and commentator Nagar Mortazavi has had a tough job recently, explaining to Iranian audiences why the US has unilaterally pulled out of the nuclear deal that lifted international sanctions and hopes inside her native country.
I talk to Iranians on the ground all the time. People are either worried, they are hopeless, and they are just angry at the current situation. There were celebrations after the deal was struck, and the Iranians were very hopeful of the economic benefits that the deal would bring to them, and they didn't see as much as it was promised.
The US withdrawal from the deal, its reimposition of sanctions, and the pressure Washington is putting on its allies and others to abandon the Iran deal are centre stage at this UN General Assembly. US President Trump is set to chair United Nations Security Council meeting, where the subject of the Iran nuclear deal is likely to come up. Trump is widely expected to use his appearances in New York to highlight what Washington calls bad behavior by Iran in Syria and Yemen and elsewhere in the Middle East. Analysts also expect Trump to pressure US allies and big buyers of Iranian oil to stop doing so by a US-declared deadline of November 4th. Mortazavi thinks Trump will have a tough time getting the international community on board.
This is also not just a question of trade. This is a question of security for Europeans because Iran in the Middle East is an area that's very close to them geographically. This is also a question of principles for certain European diplomats who put almost a decade and then the final 2 years of rigorous negotiations into this, and they keep saying they don't understand why President Trump had to unravel it unilaterally.
Many nations like India and Japan want to continue buying Iranian oil and have asked the US to exempt them from sanctions. Russia and China have vowed to keep the Iran nuclear deal on track despite US withdrawal and pressure. Some suspect Washington is really trying to make Tehran collapse economically and ushering in a change of government.
I think this administration is not very sure what their policy is. In public, they're saying that their policy is not regime change because regime change would require military intervention. Regime change would require essentially another war in the Middle East, which is something President Trump has been critical of.
Iran will be centre stage again here on Wednesday in the halls behind me when US President Trump chairs a meeting of the UN Security Council. Iran's proliferation, as Washington calls it, will be raised. But on the other side of the table will be allies and permanent members, Russia and China, who will disagree with Washington's approach. Nathan King, CGTN, at the United Nations in New York.